Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Truckers Podcast, FYI, Conversations Without Barriers. I am your host, Doug from Ontario, Canada. It is Sunday, and it is the 6th of April. I hope everybody is having a good weekend. Now, I want to address this crisis here in Canada, homeless crisis. Now, as you may or may not know, we have a federal election going on here in Canada. And the candidates who are running for office have talked about housing and come forward with some of their plans. But I haven't heard them address homelessness. Talked about housing, affordable housing for the middle class, but we haven't heard them discuss how they're going to deal with this crisis. The homeless in Canada is a significant issue. The estimated in ranging between 150,000 to 300,000 homeless experience homeless annually. On any given night, there's between 30,000 to 35,000 people who are without stable housing. And Toronto has the highest number of homeless individuals, and that's around 10,418 people who are affected. And the cost of homelessness to the Canadian economy is estimated to be over $7 billion per year, factoring in emergency shelters, healthcare, and other support services. And the government has committed to $4 billion over 10 years to address this crisis. And sadly, the number has increased in recent years, and many Canadians' communities are in the midst of the homeless crisis. Especially true for Toronto, the country's most populous city. Women, the number of women who are experiencing poverty, and homelessness is on the rise. 27% of shelters users are women. 16% of senior women live in poverty. And across Canada, 1.9 million plus women are living on low income, dangerously close to homelessness. And women are much more likely to be victims of violence and assault on the streets. In fact, many women will stay in unhealthy, sometimes violent relationships instead of putting themselves on the streets. 1 in 4 are Indigenous peoples. Indigenous peoples are overrepresented in the homeless population despite making up 5% of Canada's population. In fact, Indigenous peoples are 8 times more likely to experience homeless. This is especially true in urban areas such as Toronto and Metro Vancouver. This can be attributed to historical trauma, discrimination, racism, which translates to limited opportunities, extreme poverty, and lack of adequate housing and supports, also put them at higher risk for homelessness. Children and youth. Child and youth homelessness is growing at an alarming rate. And to give you a better idea, 1 in every 7 living in homeless shelters is a child. And approximately 20% of people experiencing homelessness are between the ages of 13 to 25. And not having a home is particularly challenging for young individuals as it impacts their education and health care. As a result, these are extremely high rates of school dropouts, involvement in crime, and victims of human trafficking. Homelessness can have a lifelong impact on their mental health and physical health. And the number of homeless veterans is growing. The number of homeless veterans is growing year by year, the highest being in Ontario and British Columbia. As it is, veterans face unique challenges and difficulties in transitioning back into civilian life after military service. And these individuals experience high rates of mental health issues such as anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, or addiction due to the lack of support programs. And many veterans end up on the streets. Many experience hidden homeless. Hidden homeless refers to those who are homeless but not out on the streets. For an example, they might be living in their car, staying with friends, family members. And according to this Statistics Canada, 1 in 5 will stay in the situation for at least 1 year. And people without a history of childhood abuse, as well as people with disabilities, are more likely to experience hidden homeless than others. Homelessness in Canada is a complex problem that demands a response from governments, service providers, service recipients, and the community at large. And we need to support each and every person that is on a journey out of homelessness, whether it's providing safe and affordable housing units, addressing issues around mental health and addiction, or connecting individuals and families to other support services. And we have to have these solutions that lead to the positive outcomes. Now, in the downtown core in the city where I reside, um, they have the Inner Community Center, which offers services. The Arcade is another service where individuals experience homeless can go in, and now it's set up like they've been there for like 40 years. Now it's set up. I mean, they'd be able to go in there. They're able to do laundry. They're able to have a shower, and of course, get snacks and something to drink. There's a lot of groups around the city that they provide dinners for them. And just down the street is the Unity Project, which is a homeless shelter. The business association in the downtown core, obviously, they have their concerns with vandalism, theft, and recently, city council, not all the city council, but some of the city council and some of the business people down there want, in particularly the Arcade Mission Services, to move someplace else. They just had a vote on to keep funding the Arcade Mission Services, to run it from now until sometime next year to next March, in the tune of about $600,000. And one of the city councilors has really taken charge on voting against this funding. And I'm thinking to myself, where would these people go? They're not going to go anywhere. They're going to stay in the downtown core. The homeless shelter, the Unity Project, they're not moving anywhere. But it seems that, they're just looking at the Arcade Mission Services that, this one city councilor thinks that, the Arcade Mission Services is the problem. Businesses come and go all the time, and they have come and gone from the downtown core for years. You can't paint everybody with the same brush. Yes, there are people who are living on the streets. Yes, they're causing problems. They're doing vandalism, shoplifting, but not everybody down there are doing this. The Centertown Plaza is another place that is experiencing, damage, vandalism. The Centertown Plaza is basically vacant. There may be a couple businesses in there, a couple stores in there. But they want the unit or the Arcade Mission Services to remain where they are. So the city council had a vote whether they're going to keep funding the Arcade Mission Services. And the Arcade Mission Services got their $600,000 to remain in the downtown core. See, homeless people have nowhere to go, obviously. Now, the federal government, like I said earlier before you came on my show, and thank you for joining me, we're in the midst of a federal election here in Canada. Yes, the candidates running for office, they've talked about housing, for the middle class, build more houses. But I haven't heard, even the media, I haven't even heard the media asking them questions when, what are you going to do about the homeless crisis, the tent encampments, treatment. Because before the federal election came about, the province of Ontario and the premier of Ontario is slashing programs like the safe injection sites. 9 of them are going to be closing. There were mayors across Ontario calling on the provincial government to use the notwithstanding clause in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms to remove tent encampments, fine people who would continue to set up tent encampments. Fine or arrest individuals using drugs in public spaces. That would not even be sustainable. Punishing the homeless is not the way to go about it. Now, by closing these 9 safe injection sites, opening up other services for treatment, that takes time. They have to have the locations. And the other thing that comes into mind is not in my backyard. NIMBYism. So closing down these safe injection sites and opening up treatment centers, they are getting pushed back because, this would be, some of them would be set up, as outpatients. They won't be staying there for long periods of time. And the provincial government still hasn't come up with any ideal locations for these treatment centers. Potentially, we could do them in hospitals. See, I believe in harm reduction. These safe injection sites were saving lives. And without them, it puts people who are addicted to drugs in more harm's way if we don't have these safe injection sites. And services and social services have, come out and said people are going to die with no place to go and only to overdose and no one to find them in time. We had a pretty rough winter here in southern Ontario. And the Arc-Aid mission services, over the course of the winter, they got some funding, and that was only to add 30 spaces. Now, the Arc-Aid mission services, they operate 2 locations. One was for the overnights, and of course, the one that has been downtown for 40 plus years, which provide other services, they got an additional, so they got 15 spaces for people to come in and stay the night. Mission services, they were completely full. The Unity Project, completely full. And it still didn't provide enough people for shelter. The people remained in tent encampments throughout the entire winter. The City of London didn't even have or even put together a winter response plan. I don't know how they couldn't have come up with that. We have winter every single year, and the city couldn't come up with a response plan for a winter response plan and get every person out of these encampments and put them in a safe shelter. And services and people working for these services, they were going out there every single day and every single night, checking up on people to make sure they have dry clothing, warm clothing, blankets, providing them with food. And I just found it really unacceptable that they didn't have a winter response plan in place. Now, we here in the city where I reside, they have been able to build some housing with supports. But we still have a long way to go. Now, when when the government talks about affordability, I mean, who are they talking about affordability for? And what I hear, it just seems to be, the middle class. Yes, we have a housing shortage. Yes, people are on the verge of becoming homeless, living paycheck to paycheck. Now, if they have a loss of job, an illness, they could lose their home. Far too many Canadians are living in poverty. Far too many Canadians are at risk of becoming homeless. Recently, it started with the city of Hamilton um, when it came to reno evictions. And this is where landlords would issue a tenant an N13 form stating they have to move out of the residence in order for them to do the renovations, and then re-renting it to somebody else for higher rent. Because when it comes to the N13 form, even though you get served that form, you do not have to move out. Landlord can take you to the landlord tenants board and say, I have to do renovations. And they even go as far as saying, well, a relative is going to move in. And that also, is another scrupulous plan by a landlord just to get you out of that unit so they can charge more rent. Hamilton put a bylaw together, and now the landlords who want to do renovations, now they have to get a renovation license, and that could run anywhere from $600 to $700 per unit. An inspector has to come in and inspect the unit to see if it is necessary for that tenant to move out of that unit. And they have to keep giving updates on the process of the renovations. So if the inspector comes in and say, well, the tenant doesn't really have to move out, you can complete the renovations with the tenant still there. And even if the tenant did have to move out, then the landlord has to provide a place for them. And once the renovations are completed, the tenant moves back in at the same rent that they were paying. So if somebody was paying $800 a month for a one-bedroom apartment, that's where it stays. And this is to prevent rental evictions. City of London, um, it just, their bylaws came into effect, I believe it was March the 1st of this year. The city of Toronto, their bylaw on rental evictions isn't going to start until July 1st. Other municipalities or cities haven't followed suit yet because they want to see how this is going to play out. And yes, the landlord's tenant board still plays a factor. So the landlord would still have to go through the landlord's tenants board anyhow. Is this challengeable, these bylaws? Probably. And that's something that the landlords would have to do. They'd have to go to the landlord's tenants board and state their case of why the person has to move out. Now, with the amount of people who are living on our streets, sleeping in encampments, it hasn't changed very much. Yes, some people got some housing, and they got housing with supports. And this is where they're starting. People who have a mental illness or addiction, post-traumatic stress disorder, and maybe all three at the same time. They're going to get the supportive housing. And the city is also, looking at the social housing we have here in the city. So families living in social housing, does this family still require that 3-bedroom or that 4-bedroom? Our kids grow up or kids move out. Do we need to downsize them from, a 4-bedroom to a 3-bedroom or a 3-bedroom to a 2-bedroom to open up units and to get people into housing? And that's a slow process, because now, what's happening too is that you're taking a family and you're uprooting them from that community to another community where that's, say they now only need a 3-bedroom or they only need a 2-bedroom. Kids changing schools, a new community. And that can be difficult for the family, difficult on the kids, because now they're leaving their community that they've lived in for many years, all their friends, and the kids, with their school friends now have to be uprooted and move to another part of the city and go to a new school, make new friends. And that can be hard on kids as well. But this is necessary that we have to do this because we have to free up units in order to get other people into social housing. The government, for this election, the now Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney, now wants to have the government, the federal government, if he's elected, to build 500,000 homes annually. Affordable housing. The federal government hasn't been doing this for decades. It was the early 80s into the 90s when the federal government stopped funding housing, passed it down to the provincial government, and then the provincial government in the 90s passed it down to the municipalities and gave them the responsibility to build their own houses. This is why we have a shortage in housing. We didn't keep building. We haven't even built even social housing, stopped building social housing in the mid 80s. This is why we're in a housing crisis. This is why we're in a homeless crisis. 30 to 35,000 people on any given night experience homelessness here in Canada. Toronto, the most populous city here in Ontario, on any given night is 10,000 people. And we can't even count the hidden homeless because obviously they're hidden. And there's people who are sleeping in their cars, people who are couch surfing, staying with friends and relatives. So we don't even know what that count is. And cities are not even doing a point in time count. And if they do it, it's like once every 5 years to get, a close an estimate of how many people are homeless across Canada. And they're saying, well, it's between 150,000 to 300,000 people. So we don't even have the exact numbers. So is it 150,000 people who are homeless, or is it 300,000 people are homeless? Or can we go somewhere in between? We can't be cutting services. So going back to the council of the city of London, and one council person is standing up voting against funding the Arcade Mission Services. That is a critical support system that has been there for 40 plus years. You cannot cut that funding. Because people, I mean, let's say they did cut it. Let's say they cut the funding, but they did. Where are they going to go? They weren't going to go anywhere. If they cut the funding from one place, well, the Unity project down the street wouldn't be able to support all of it. The mission services won't be able to support all of it. The homeless people aren't just going to just pack up and leave. It didn't even make sense for someone to turn around, well, we're just going to vote. I want you to vote against this funding. The funding passed with a landslide. So the Arcade Mission Services got their $600,000. And even when it comes to building houses, housing and social housing too, um, what parts of the city are they going to put it in? Are they going to have pushback from communities of not in my backyard? We need, cooperative housing, because we're losing, the affordable housing that we had. I mean, we're losing it. Big corporations come up and buy these properties. And one in particular, this was like, I believe it was like last summer, um, corporation bought these two buildings. Um, and like when we go back to talking about the rental evictions, and people who lived in these buildings, all of them are on a fixed income, whether it's a disability, a pension, a social income like welfare. And so this corporation comes in and they start handing out these N13s, these rental evictions. It was very clear they bought this property, these two high rises, you know, in order to get these people out so they can, double or triple the rent. That's still ongoing, case by case, going through the tribunal. I mean, even these people who are running this corporation, and they're even offering people, money. Will give you, $5,000 to move out. They're paying $750, $800 a month, for their apartments. And even if you gave somebody $5,000, where are they going to go? Their income isn't that $5,000. Their income is their disability, or their low pensions. And where are they going to go rent? Because right now here in the city of London, the average rent for a one bedroom is $1,750. And if they need a two bedroom, they're going to be paying like $2,500 a month. So their income, they have it coming in. There's no feasible way that they'd be able to afford to move anyplace else. And this is why it's so important that, the federal government, the provincial government, the municipalities, and services, we all need to work together so we can get people into housing. And as this election campaign goes on, I mean, what is it going to be? April the 28th is election day, as we go to the polls and vote. And like I said, they haven't, they talked about housing, affordability, for the middle class. And so on their campaign trails, they're putting out what they want to do. Mark Carney, the prime minister right now, saying he wants to build 500,000 homes annually. Directing that towards the middle class. For the lower income families, we need affordable, sustainable, safe housing for them as well. It's a long, painstaking process. All the red tape and regulations and everything. And, to be able to build this housing. And of course, you know, communities, um, NIMBYism, not in my backyard. That's another thing that we need to address. You know, um, it's unfortunate that not everybody, but some people just paint a group of people with the same brush because somebody has a low income or somebody who has an addiction or has a mental illness or they have a disability, discrimination. That they would, you know, to them that they'd be the people that causes problems, and that's not the case. And you can't paint everybody with the same brush. You think the middle class, there isn't people who cause problems, there isn't people who are criminals. Think the middle class, there isn't anybody who doesn't have an addiction. You'd have to paint the whole society with the same brush. And that's why, you know, um, I want to advocate for social housing, affordable housing. Advocate for people who need help. We've never been in this time where more and more people, and even people, people who are on a low income, struggling to even put food on the table. See, food banks, when they first came about, they were only to be temporary. And here we are 40 plus years later, the food banks still exist. And more people need help. Stagnant wages. The minimum wage here in Ontario, I believe it's around $17.65 an hour. It goes up every October. And I think it'll go up to $17.75 an hour. But how are you going to live on that? Where are you going to live on that? And if you are, you know, in a place where your rent is way below market rent, the price of groceries. And not all places, like in like social housing, you pay your rent and then everything else is paid for, your heat and hydro, your water. But not all places are like that. If are lucky enough that you still living in, say you live in a townhouse and you live there for years, you're paying $800 a month, you got to pay the heat and hydro and water and put food on your table and clothe your kids and clothe yourself. Maybe you have a car. You got to put gas in your car. Your car needs maintenance. And people have to make choices. And those choices that people have to make and it's happening and you know this is happening, do I put food on the table or do I pay that bill? Whether it's the gas bill, the hydro bill, the water bill, something needs to be fixed on the car. All these choices that you have to make. Everything else is going to suffer because you got to put food on the table for yourselves and for your children. Bills get behind. Yes, we have programs that can help, but people shouldn't have to be in that position. And it's only been recently, probably in the last 6 years potentially, that the Ontario government had decided to uh, start increasing the minimum wage on an annual basis when they should have been doing it long before that. But even think about it for a minute. Even somebody who's making $20 an hour. What kind of rent can they afford on $20 an hour? Is $20 an hour a livable wage in today's society? Can somebody on $20 an hour afford an $1,800 apartment or $2,200 to a $2,500 townhouse to rent? Not very likely. They say that the city of Toronto is one of the most expensive places to live. Vancouver being the highest place, most expensive place to live, in Toronto being the second most expensive place to live. Someone's making $20 an hour living in Toronto. There's no possible way that you could live on that money. And they've always been, one of the most expensive places to live. Even if we go back 20 years, they were still one of the most expensive places to live. And the rents were always higher than other municipalities or cities. They always were higher. And now, with these tariffs, it's just increasing the cost of living. It's going to affect people's jobs. Everything that you buy, everything. Recently, I was looking at an article, when it comes to the iPhones. Potentially that iPhone could cost you as much as $2,300 to get a new iPhone. That's ridiculous. Your cost of clothing is going to go up. Cost of food is going to go up. Gasoline in the United States is going up. Here in Ontario, gas prices are coming down. And the reason why they're coming down is because the federal government put a carbon tax on consumers. So that costs you at the pump. That costs you for heating your home. And when Trudeau stepped down as prime minister and the Liberal Party voted for their leader of the new party, which is Mark Carney. He becomes prime minister. Temporary, mind you, because we have to have an election and we're in the middle of an election. He removed that carbon tax off consumers, not the corporations. So our gas prices come down and our heating costs are going to come down and have come down. But, like I say, with these tariffs, I mean, worldwide, like something like 160 countries. I mean, Donald Trump even put tariffs on a couple of islands that are destitute. And the one island only has penguins on it, and they got tariffed at 50%. I don't know how the penguins feel about that, but it's absolutely ridiculous. And the way he came about it, to say, oh, this, the Europeans are going to get 25%, and Asia's going to get 50%, China's going to get another 45%, and all that stuff. The trade deficit. Of looking at what their trade deficit is and say it's just made up. The European Union, is getting tariffed at 20%. And, before even the tariffs came into place, their tariff on the United States was 2%. So where in the hell did he come up saying that, oh, the United Kingdom is charging us 40% in tariffs, so we're going to charge them 20%. We'll cut them a break. We'll just do it in half. I mean, all the numbers that he come up with is just bogus. And the top economists and stuff like that has called them out. That these numbers that you come up with are absolutely bogus. And now just recently, like we've had, between Canada and the United States, when it comes to our soft lumber, the United States always had a tariff on there. And I think it was something used to be around 12.5%. Then it went up to 14.5%. Now, just recently, just the other day, they upped that tariff to 34% on the soft lumber. It's ridiculous. That means the importer, the United States, is going to pay 34% more and is going to pass that cost on to you Americans. Inflation, is just skyrocketed now. These tariffs make no sense. We have a trade agreement with the United States. Well, it's Canada, Mexico, and the United States. Putting tariffs on imported cars. Now they got to determine, what is Canadian, what is American made, what are the parts. I mean, they have to go right down to the smallest screw and washer, nuts and bolts, and tariff that too. It's going to be a tedious task. And of course, Canada retaliated to any American cars being imported into Canada at 25%. This whole trade war is just absolutely ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. We, the consumers, we, the people, are the ones going to pay the price. I myself don't want the cost of living to go up. We already have a high cost of living now, as it is. And then dumbass Trump slaps tariffs on everybody. It's ridiculous. Most ridiculous thing. It makes it even harder to build housing. And this is why the government and the federal government and provincial government is talking about interprovincial trading. Here in Canada is knocking down those barriers, cutting the red tape. Well, we have plenty of lumber. And by doing that, it'll reduce the cost here in Canada in order to build housing because we just use our own lumber. Yeah, the Americans will still buy the lumber. Yeah, they're going to pay that 34% tariff, and your housing cost is going to be a hell of a lot higher than ours. We just have to wait to see how things play out. But it's not going to get any easier for the time being, that's for sure. Too many people, especially when people who are living on a low income, even the middle class, it's still going to be difficult. So hopefully somebody comes to their senses. We just have to see what happens, ladies and gentlemen. But anyways, enjoy the rest of your weekend. And tomorrow morning, I will be back out here for 9 a.m. And also just want to let you know, too, as well. So to all the people who are listening to the show here on Podbean, I'm also doing a live YouTube as well at the same time. So you can join me on the YouTube, the Truckers Podcast, FYI, Conversations Without Barriers, and of course here on Podbean. So until tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., take care. Enjoy the rest of your weekend and be safe out there. I'm your host, Doug from Ontario, Canada. Take care.